Two minutes.
Fasten your tray tables and return your seats to the upper. Okay, with everybody this way.
Pull the gain on the handheld, gain on the handheld. Okay. Good morning. Good to see everyone. We appreciate you being here. Apologize for the squawking. We had a little, it seems like we frequently have little technical difficulties. I also just realized I left my glasses sitting over there. Let me grab those. It'd be good to see you, even better. We had use that squelch you just heard because we had to switch. Whoops. Will you pull the volume down on this just a little bit? Thank you, that's better. We had what's clearly a short in the line, so we had to switch a few things around and we didn't have quite the time. Still, the gain and the gain down a little bit. Actually, you can take it a click or two down. That's great, thank you. So anyway, as you can see, we're adjusting on the fly, but I think we've got it all set here. Again, welcome. We're glad that you're here today. Welcome to those online. We're also glad that you are here. For all of you, just to know, next week we won't be online. I'm having some outpatient knee surgery on Friday. So Elsie is going to fill in the gap on Sunday for us and share some stuff, I think, from Jim Dollar. And I'll help with a little meditation that she can share with you. And we'll have our musician here as well. So it'll be the same format, we won't be online next week and only next week. So thank you for understanding that. Any announcements that you'd like to share with your church family right now? Elsie, please.
This is a personal announcement. I look forward to seeing all of you next Sunday. Whatever you do for other folks, that's a spiritual prayer. My son was in a serious car accident a month ago, and he is in horrible pain all of the time. So if you could send a prayer his way, I really appreciate that.
Yeah. Anything, Elsie's son in a terrible car accident, he's in a lot of pain. It's happened a month ago. So please, if you're the type who prays for folks, please send those out. Send all your energy and positive thoughts that you can that way as well.
What's his name? Oh, he goes by Tom.
And he goes by Tom. By Tom. So please keep that in mind.
And one thing I'd like to acknowledge is they brought something, was the Marty Sheets thing that went on this week.
Absolutely. If you weren't there, there was a lovely dedication of a bench at our Greensboro Aquatic Center in the name of Marty and his participation in the Special Olympics and all the medals that he won and participating in swimming. And they presented him with a plaque as well. So we're proud to have been part of that, as so many church members attended, and also to have Marty and his family being part of this spiritual community. It's a wonderful, wonderful event. Any other announcements? In that case, just a quick reminder to everyone, I'm so pleased to see everyone wearing masks. The numbers are going back up in America. They're going back up in North Carolina. And yes, while if you're vaccinated, you're reasonably protected. You're not 100% protected, but you're reasonably protected. The spread of the virus gives it more and more chances to mutate. So you can still be a carrier. So it's still intelligent and smart to wear a mask anytime that you're around groups of folks. For right now, we need to get this the spread stopped so it stops mutating so much and possibly mutating in a way that we're not really all covered for. So continue wearing those masks, and we appreciate the social distancing. As we finish, I'll remind you to try to gather outside rather than in the hallways or in the spaces in between our pews where people might be trying to pass. They might feel differently than you do about interacting with folks. That said, let us begin. We'll have our normal format today. I'll be doing a scripture. Our friend Sam Frazier will be playing a little bit of tunes for us. I'll do a message. Sam will play more music for us, thank goodness. And then I'll have a prayer meditation and a blessing as well. So let me start with our scripture for today. It comes from the book of Proverbs. I'll be reading from chapter 8, verses 2 through 4, continuing with 15. A fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but only in expressing his opinion. When wickedness comes, contempt comes also, and with dishonor comes disgrace. The words of a man's mouth are deep waters. The fountain of wisdom is a bubbling brook. An intelligent heart acquires knowledge, and the ear of the wise seeks knowledge. May we add blessing and understanding to the reading of these words. Sam, can we have you play us a little music, please?
First you make a plan, you make a real good plan that you hang on the bones of a method. It's tried and true, it might work for you. You got to give it time, just a little more time, but you can hang on the hope in the method. 'Cause when it kicks in, your life will begin. You've been stumbling around, I expect, living by cause and effect. You are who you are, and you've gotten this far. But whenever you start to reflect, you need a new plan, a different kind of plan that you hang on the bones of a theory. It's shiny and new, it might work for you.
much. We always are fortunate to have you with us, and your gifts and skill sets that you bring obviously brings a lot of joy to everyone. So thank you. Appreciate it very much. My message this morning is entitled, I'm an agnostic Christian. You should be too. I've been asked, I talked about this about 3 years ago, and I've been asked multiple times to revisit it. So I am doing that for you today. Many times I have heard this: you have to believe in fill in the blank if you want to consider yourself a Christian, or you have to fill in the blank, or you have to vote for fill in the blank if you want to consider yourself a progressive. Now, because of my online activities with the Christian Left and progressivechristianity.org, and even my own personal social media, I hear bottom line fundamentalist statements like this almost all the time. And yes, even from people who see themselves as progressives. The thing is, the way that I see it, progressivism and that kind of fundamentalism, they just don't mix. I mean, sure, like oil and water, you can put them together, but ultimately, they are much too different to exist together. Sooner or later, they separate. Now, it may be a little bit helpful here to talk about what I mean by progressive and fundamentalist. Books can, and certainly have been, written on what these two terms mean. So keep in mind that I fully recognize that what I am doing here is little more than establishing cursory parameters for this discussion. And quite naturally, there will be those who disagree with my understanding of these concepts, which is perfectly fine. These just happen to be the understandings that I'm working from for this message. For me, the linchpin of progressive thought is open-mindedness. Well, more specifically, open-mindedness based on rational thought and information. Now, in contrast, fundamentalist thinking establishes certain bottom lines that must be accepted as truths. And right away, you should be able to see the odd partnership that is made when you try to add certain fundamentalist beliefs to progressive thought. Outside of definitive proof, progressive minds should always be open to possibilities. And yes, those minds may also be fairly certain about particular things, something like God is love. But they are also always open to the possibility of new information pointing them in a different direction. Now, that should make it very difficult to entertain dogma within progressive communities. Dogma, of course, is a set of beliefs defined to establish authority, designed by the established authority, that is to be held as unquestionably true. Now, that kind of certitude leaves absolutely no room for certain kinds of questions, which for some people is actually one of the attractive aspects of fundamentalism. You see, living in the questions makes some people very uncomfortable, particularly those who may have grown up in the certitude of traditional evangelicalism. It may be that the natural instability of life causes some folks to be attracted to things that they can see as clearly as stable and certain. Religious traditions that teach fundamentalism tend to nurture our need for that certainty. The teaching is so strong. The teaching is so strong that even when reality, facts, life, and even love slam up against irrational fundamentalist beliefs like being gay is a sin, and people start questioning many of the beliefs they were taught, well, they still have this deeply seated need to hold on to some fundamentals to help them feel stable and to provide answers so there isn't so much living in the questions. That learned and sometimes deeply seated need, well, it contributes to the growing reality of evangelicals who grew up in traditional churches, but now who identify more strongly with certain parts of progressive Christianity. And many of them try to sort of straddle the line by adopting the somewhat now established progressive Christian community, and then still trying to insert certain fundamentalist beliefs, such as the Trinity or substitutional atonement, as essentials which we must believe in order to call ourselves Christian. As I said a minute ago, you should be able to see the sort of odd partnership that's made when you try to add certain fundamentalist beliefs into progressive thought. So, the difficult reality for folks in that position trying to add the two together is that in progressive communities, questioning fundamentalist beliefs is ultimately encouraged. And admittedly, I would very much like to say that you cannot have fundamentalist beliefs and call yourself progressive. But that wouldn't be very progressive of you, would it? Get you both ways. So, for now, I'll just say that I have a very hard time understanding how a person can rationally call themselves progressive, but have certain fundamentalist beliefs that they use to define who is and who isn't a Christian. Or as Christian writer and political activist that you've all probably read, Anne Lamott, points out, certainty is missing the point entirely. Which brings me to the deeper, more specific point of this message. And it's related to how I use the word agnostic. I prefer to use the word agnostic as an adjective rather than a noun. Now, the origin of that preference, it starts with one of my living heroes, renowned astrophysicist and just brilliant all-around thinker, Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson. And in addressing the question of whether or not he is an atheist, Dr. Tyson says, I would say, if I find a word that comes closest, it would be agnostic. To refer to someone who doesn't know, but hasn't yet really seen evidence for God, but's prepared to embrace the evidence if it's there, but if it's not, won't be forced to have to think something that is not otherwise supported. Sounds like a scientist. Now, for me personally, the most helpful thing I've seen come out of his discussion resulting from his answer was the idea of using agnostic as an adjective rather than a noun. Now, admittedly, Dr. Tyson uses agnostic as a noun. I still do sometimes as well. But because of his answer, I have heard him frequently described as an agnostic atheist. Now, the truth is, while Dr. Tyson actually prefers no labels besides scientist, and I would bet he's probably okay with educator, there are lots of other labels that could be used to describe his perspective, maybe something like a weak atheist or something like that. But I find agnostic atheist to be much more helpful for describing what I understand him to be saying about his perspective about the existence of some higher deity. You see, Tyson defines agnostic as someone who doesn't know but hasn't yet really seen evidence for God, but's prepared to embrace the evidence. As a modifier for a noun, that can be really, really helpful. Whether it's modifying atheist or modifying Christian or possibly other faith traditions, it's really sort of a nice augmentation that helps put aside some of the assumptions that tend to be associated with certain labels, which is one of the very things that Dr. Tyson himself is trying to avoid. Now, following that train of thought, I now call myself an agnostic Christian. I believe that there most probably is a God. But faith itself insists that God's existence is not provable. After all, that's why it's called faith. I shared a moment ago that quote from Anne Lamott. Let me share with you the fuller context of the quote. She says, the opposite of faith is not doubt, but certainty. Certainty is missing the point entirely. Faith includes noticing the mess, the emptiness and discomfort, and letting it be there until some light returns. Not only that, I think that it is essential to remember, possibly particularly for progressives, that many of the cornerstones of a healthy community, like tolerance and acceptance and patience, they rest in the personal realization that you could be wrong about someone or something. Or as American writer and philosopher Will Durant once penned, tolerance grows only when faith loses certainty. Certainty is murderous. Earlier I said that the linchpin of progressive thought was open-mindedness based on rational thought and information. If the set of beliefs that you're following have something, say faith, within its practices that presumes the inability to prove the existence of God, you are approaching the beliefs, and you're approaching the beliefs with open-mindedness, rational thought, as progressives should do. Then, like Dr. Tyson, you must be prepared to embrace the evidence if it's there. That means admitting that while you believe, you don't know. Or as freelance writer Robert Brault says, what is certainty but the refuge of those whose faith is not strong enough to entertain doubt? Let me read that again. What is certainty but the refuge of those whose faith is not strong enough to entertain doubt? And for me, it means if you are a progressive Christian, it's time to admit that you're most likely an agnostic Christian. Amen. Sam, can we get you to play a few more tunes or another tune?
Which one, Mark?
All of them. They're all so good, it's hard to choose. Switching that camera, we got a little backlighting last time, so you might see me play with that for a second.
It's short, so if you want me to play another one, just let me know.
If it's short, go ahead and do two.
All right, in that case, I'm going to do two.
Yeah.
This one's called Drunken Palm Reader.
Everyone wants to be happy. You want to be happy too. Whatever that means, wherever it leads, I want to be happy for you. She sounds like the usual danger. You act like you've fallen in a foregone conclusion, a hunching destiny calling it in tonight. I can't wait to meet her, 'cause you're my baby shine. The future looks bright to a drunken palm reader. It's love if you're lucky. Prophets come, prophets go, but where they shop, I don't know. I don't know, you don't know, but I thought I saw one at Target. Wandering around, trying on shorts, chuckling to himself in the underwear aisle with the funny socks you like. 'Cause the dogs and cats and the tigers and the sloth, cherries and avocados, and sheep and baby peaches. If you think those socks are funny too, how come you never buy? 'Cause prophets say if you wear them in your sleep, your feet are free to dream. And prophets remember all their dreams and write them down first thing in the morning. The second thing, if you know what I mean, we're all sleeping.
Thank you, Sam, so much. Love both of them, obviously. Let's take a little time to turn more inward. As I like to say, this can be a prayer for you. It can be a moment of meditation. You just listen to the words and grab hold of one that's meaningful or a phrase that's meaningful. Let's do bow our heads together. We want a deeper faith, but because of what we were taught in our early spiritual years, we are also sometimes worried to ask too many questions, to have it seem too much like we are uncertain. May we learn to hold on to a love that is so unquenchable. It is willing to ask questions of faith, even in places others fear to tread. Let it serve as an example and a reminder of not only how we understand our faith, but how we put it into practice. When we see a world full of food, yet also full of starving people, may it lead us to ask difficult questions and to insist on better solutions. When we see a world full of empty houses, yet also full of homeless folks, may it lead us to ask the difficult questions and to insist on better solutions. When we see the world full of sickness and yet full of medical solutions, may it lead us to ask the difficult questions and to insist on better solutions. When we see a world full of pain and grief and full of people of many faiths whose core and foundational beliefs are love and compassion, may it lead us to ask the difficult questions, to insist on better solutions. May we never shy from asking the important questions and holding loosely onto the things we believe we know. Amen. Now, as you go out to the world, may you fully experience love in this world and recognize your connection to the world and to creation. And may you share that love with all of those whose paths you cross so that they may know it more fully as well. Go now in love and in peace. Thank you for coming. We'll see you again.
Mark,